Hey friend, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today I'm so excited because we are diving in and creating some easy DIY birthday cards using stamps and stencils. More particularly, I'm using my candles background stamp, stencil, and the birthday basic stamp set. And they're all back in stock, which is so exciting. I'll have them linked down below so you guys can check it out. Or of course, grab any birthday supplies you already have at home and let's get into crafting. First, let's start off with the candles stamp and stencil set. And I'm actually just going to use the stencil set first by itself to show how you can use them if you only buy one or the other. This one is a two-piece layering set. It's got two stencils in here, one to make the base of the candles and one to make the flames so you can do them in separate colors. I've done these with ink before, but today I want to use both of these layers with Lunar paste to create some really beautiful shine on my card. I'm going to use black cardstock to really make things stand out and shine, and Lunar paste has tons of pigment, so it'll stand out really nicely on that black cardstock. So I'm first going to just tape this down to my work surface to make sure that it doesn't move. And then I can go in with the first stencil, which is the candle layer, bring in my mint tape, and I'm just going to line it up where I want it to be on my card project. All right, there we go. And then I can tape it right down onto my work surface. And the mint tape is just gonna hold it in place nicely to make sure that it doesn't shift while we do all of our stenciling. And the thing I love about the mint tape too is if it ends up going on your cardstock, it doesn't rip the cardstock at all. Alright, so I've grabbed a couple of Lunar pastes that I want to use in some blues and blue-green colors to blend out the candles. And for this, I'm going to use a foam blending tool. I'm going to bring out a piece of blending foam. And for this, you could use either the domed foam or flat foam. I haven't found too much of a difference between either one, so I'm just going to go with the flat foam here. And this is just a little container I got from Target. I'll show you guys a tour of my craft room if you want soon, but this is like a modular little kitchen container. I highly recommend it. And then to create my palette, I'm just going in using an acrylic block and a palette knife, and I'm just going to lightly spread these colors on top of the surface to make a nice palette. And you want to spread them pretty thin too, because you don't want big globs of the color. All right, next I'll go into Minty Fresh and spread that down on the acrylic block. And then lastly, I'll bring in this beautiful blue color, which is Clear Skies. All right, now let's add this color to my surface. I'm gonna start off with the lighter colors first, so going into Clear Skies, and you wanna kind of tap your color, get it onto the surface, but again, not get globs of color. That's why we spread it pretty thin when we made our palette, because you don't want the color to seep underneath. You just want to kind of lightly blend it on the surface with circular motions, just like this. So I'm blending it sort of like I would in ink, right? Just go in those circular motions and lightly lay down the color. I find that this blending foam works really well to add the thin layer of Lunar paste. And the benefit to doing it like this is that it dries super quickly. So if we want to keep the layers, this part is probably already dry. So I'm going to go in with a second layer of this Lunar paste and just blend it over top. If you want it even more of a dark and rich saturated color, you can just keep going over top. And you just get this beautiful blend and shine. So without cleaning the tool, I'm just gonna go in to my next color. This is Minty Fresh. I'll tap into it, make sure we don't have too much on our tool, and then I'll just go in onto the surface and start blending this with Clear Skies. And these colors blend together just beautifully. They work together really nicely. So we'll just kind of blend it together. And I'm just creating kind of circles of color in several different areas across the card. And then I'll go down in this corner as well and blend that out really nicely. All right, and then last but not least, I'll go into Tropical Tango. I love this beautiful kind of dark, rich teal color, and I'll just bring it onto the surface, again, making sure that I don't have too much, and blend it in with the other two colors. And here I'm just kind of color blocking in some of the areas that we left with the last Tropical Tango color that we have here. If you want to, again, go back over top of some of the colors to make it even a little bit darker. So once we're done with that, we can peel off the tape and then we'll lift off the stencil and check out that beautifully stenciled design. The shine is already coming through, but to dry it even more, I'm just gonna go in with my heat tool and heat set this a little bit. And because it's so thin, like I said, it barely needs any heat at all. Maybe like 20 seconds and this stuff will be fully dry. But this is one thing I love about Lunar paste, is even if you have a thick layer, you can totally heat set it. It's heat stable if you keep the heat tool moving, and then it helps to dry along the process. And check out that beautiful shine. A little bit goes a long way with that technique. So there's still some of this paste left over, and I don't really want to waste it, so I'm just gonna take it on my acrylic block here, and I'm just going to kind of swipe it across a piece of black cardstock, and this is going to create kind of a nice blend of the colors. And once this is dry, we can do some die cutting out of it so that the paste doesn't go to waste. It creates kind of our own metallic, beautiful cardstock. And then before all this dries, I just want to spray this down with water pretty quickly, and then I'll go in with a piece of paper towel and just easily wipe this off the surface of the stencil. And then when it comes to blending foam, you can always rip it off and take it underneath the sink to wash it out while it's still wet. But here I'm just going to spray it down with water and kind of wipe it off on a paper towel until it comes completely clean and clear. And you want it to be pretty clean once it's done, because otherwise it'll harden up in the foam. But if you clean it out, you'll be able to use it over and over. So you can see when it's clean and ready to use again, it'll almost be back to white, and that's how you know it's not going to harden on you by the next time you use it. All right, we're moving into the second stencil now, and I'm going to just line it up with these candles so that the flames are on top of each one of the candles. And then I'm going to bring in some mint tape. I grabbed a new roll. I go through so much of this stuff, and we'll tape it right down onto our card to make sure that it's not going to move. And for this one, I'm going to use a little bit of this slippery and wet color, which is this beautiful yellow gold color. I'll take it on my palette knife, and like you guys saw, a little bit goes a really long way with this stuff, so you don't need a lot. Just spread it down a pretty thin layer on the acrylic block, and then we'll go in. I'm using the same blending foam, and I'm just going to go right in and blend this right on top of the surface of those flames. And again, a circular motion is going to blend this really beautifully onto the surface of your card. And then again, I'll go in on the bottom layer too. And you could apply it thicker, like with a palette knife. It just takes a little bit longer to dry. So when I'm using it with layering stencils like this, sometimes I like just applying it with a foam better because it'll dry quicker in between layers. So it really is all personal preference whether you want that texture or not. And then of course you can go back in if you want to really layer up the color and make it even bolder, like I mentioned earlier. All right, that looks great, so I can lift it off of my surface. And there you can see the beautiful background is all complete, and I'm obsessed with all of the beautiful shine on top of that dark colored cardstock like this. And the thing I love about Lunar paste is when you run your hand and fingers over top, there's all that shine, but it doesn't come off on your fingers once it's completely dry. A lot of other shiny products like this kind of rub off on your hands, and I don't like that. So I love that the Lunar paste dries and is completely set. All right, and then same thing, when Lunar paste is wet, I just spray it down with water, and you can see it's really easy to clean. I encourage you guys, even if you're not super messy, Lunar paste is really easy to clean and contain like this, so I wouldn't be too worried about it. All right, this background really shines on its own, so I'm just going to add a little bit of tape runner onto the back. And then I'll bring in a top folding stark white card base that I've cut and scored, and I can just adhere this right down on top. And I've cut it down so that there's a nice even white border all the way around the card, but I want to keep the rest of this super simple since that background is so shiny. So I think one of these big sentiments from the Birthday Basics stamp set is gonna work really well. So I'll pull this out, and I'm thinking of going with the Wish Big since we've got all those candles. So I like to take the acetate sheet and just see what's gonna look good on top of there. And I want a sentiment that's not gonna cover anything up too much. So the Celebrate could be really good, but I think the Wish Big is gonna be great in the center there. I want this to stand out, so I'm using some white cardstock and some VersaFine Clair black ink. I'm going to ink this up, and then we'll stamp it right down onto the white cardstock. And the contrast against the black background is going to really make this stand out. And then since this ink takes a little bit longer to dry, I'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder to kind of set the ink and make it nice and shiny. And I'll heat this up until it turns clear and shiny. Check that out, it makes it super bold, and I love that shiny look of clear heat embossing powder. Now when it comes to sentiments, you could just cut this out on kind of a rectangle cardstock and call it a day, but I like to go in, I'm using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. I love these because they spring back out at you so your hands won't get tired, and you get a nice smooth cut. But I find that just going around the sentiment, taking about a minute or so to do so, and just cutting it out with a little bit of a border all the way around, just helps to give your card a little bit more of a finished look. And also, you then see more of your background rather than having a whole rectangle take up the space. So to each their own, but I find that this gives more of a finished look. And you know what? I think I kind of hate it. It almost stands out a little too much on the white cardstock, so we're gonna have a change of plans here. So instead of doing black on white, I'm gonna do white on black. So I'm gonna do some heat embossing. I'll lay down my anti-static powder tool to make sure nothing sticks where I don't want it to. And then I'll use some clear sticky Versamark ink, which is going to kind of help the embossing powder hold on. So we'll stamp this right down onto our black cardstock, giving it some good pressure. And then instead of clear, I'm gonna sprinkle on some white embossing powder, tap off any of the excess, and if there's any strays, I find lightly blowing on the surface of the cardstock helps to get rid of them. And then I'll heat set this till it's nice and bright white. And then same thing with the whole fuzzy cutting monologue that I gave earlier, I'm going to quickly cut this out. All right, and then here's a quick tip. I'm gonna go in and heat this up just a little bit, And when you heat set things, it kind of helps soften the adhesive a little bit. So if you're trying to remove something, that's going to really help without ripping things. And then to make this really sticky again, I'll just go in with some liquid adhesive to make sure the sentiment's gonna stick. And then I'll place the new sentiment right on top. And check that out. I love the look so much more. That pop of white really stands out, but I like that the background of the black cardstock blends in with the dark background of the candles. The shine of this card is just so stunning with all of that beautiful lunar paste, and I love that you can use the candle stencil on its own without the stamp and it still shines beautifully. All right, next let's do something simple along with the candle's background stamp. So with this, I'm just going to flip it over to do my stamping. I'm going to use the VersaFine Clair again to get a nice jet black, crisp image. And I'll ink the stamp up all over. All right, once that's all inked, we can then go in using our stark white cardstock, and I'm going to place this onto the surface of the background stamp. And then I'm using a pressure tool. You can buy these from many different companies. I'll have some linked down below. I don't know if this one is still available, but I'm just going to press it all over the background stamp. And I find this is super helpful because I like to stamp background stamps face up like this. I find I get the best results, and those pressure tools help to make sure that everything transfers really nicely. And then again, to set the ink, I'm going in using a little bit of clear heat embossing powder. I'll sprinkle it over the top and then tap off any of the excess. And then same thing on the other side to cover the whole background. And I really love keeping my embossing powder in a container like this that's quite large, so it's really easy to put over top of the whole background. And then there's no mess at the end. Then I'll go in and heat set this till it's clear and shiny. All right, and to do my stenciling, I'm gonna go in using a Scrapbookcom Clearly Amazing matte. I'll peel off the backer sheet, and this is a nice clear sticky matte, so we can lay down our background right on top. And this helps when the things are warped to hold them down, but also if a project isn't as messy, I like this because I don't have to use as much tape to hold the stencils. And then we're really easily able to go in with the stencil, line it up over top of that stamped background, and then we can press the side of the stencil into the sticky mat, and it'll help hold things down. Like I said, you don't have to use as much tape this way. All right, and this time I'm using some orange, pink, and red to get a nice warm tone blend. So I'm starting off with Guppy in the top here, using these domed foam blending tools, and I'm just going to blend this over top of the surface of those candles. All right, once we've got that all smoothly blended, we can then move into our next color. Here I'm using a little bit of Prom Queen, and you can see I left a little bit of space at the bottom here because I'm going to want each candle to be two-toned, so I can then go in and blend this in with the orange to create a nice blend and a new color in between there, and then I'll blend it down into these next candles. And then I'll blend the next color, which is Bee Sting, into here to get a nice vibrant red, and I'll blend that up into the Prom Queen color. And you can see just how smooth and nicely these colors blend together. They blend on so smooth. And then I'll go down into the next set of candles with this same color and blend that out. And then last but not least, I'll go in using Game Over, which is this really nice, rich and dark maroon color, and blend it into that Bee Sting red color. And then there's excess ink on top of the stencil, and while it's still on the background, I'm just going to quickly wipe the stencil off. This helps to clean off the stencil, but it'll also buff off any of the extra color that's on the embossing there. So it's helpful to do that before you lift it off so that it covers all the white space. All right, so then we'll lift off that stencil, and then we can easily move into the next stencil, place it right on top. And again, you can see it lines up really super easily to color in this image, and we'll stick down the extra areas into the sticky mat. And to blend this out, I'll use a little bit of Shooting Star, which is my super bright yellow color, and I'll just blend this right over top of the candles. Super easy. And if you want to add a little dimension, I'm going to go in at the bottom using a little bit of orange. This happens to be Roar, and I'm just using some of the extra ink that's on this blending tool to lightly blend in a little bit of extra color at the bottom of those flames. And then again, I'll go in and wipe this off to clean off the stencil and also excess ink that's on top of the embossing. And then we can go in and easily lift off our stencil, and you have this beautifully blended design. Now to remove this background from the sticky mat, all we need to do is bend it upwards. It easily removes the background without it warping or bending the cardstock. And then when it comes to this mat, you can see there's a little bit of excess ink on the outside. All I'm gonna do is spray down a little bit of water on top of the surface, and then I'm gonna go in with a paper towel or a lint-free cloth and just lightly wipe off the surface. You don't wanna scrub and you don't wanna use a lot of pressure. I'm literally just barely even touching this to the surface, and the Simon Hurley Create inks clean off super easily, so those will wipe off really nicely. And you just want to remove any of the excess ink. And you might be a little bit worried that we just put water on top of a sticky mat, right? But we'll let this air dry for just a little bit. And once that water evaporates off the surface, it then becomes nice and sticky again, and it's ready to use for your next project. So to keep it safe, I'm going to go back in with this plastic acetate sheet and put it right over top so that no dust gets on the surface of the mat. I've cut this panel down, and to finish it off, I want to create a colored border of cardstock instead of just leaving the background white. So I've cut and scored an A2 top folding card base using my stark white cardstock. It's a super bright white cardstock, and it takes the ink really nicely. I've been using it this whole video. And for this, I'm going to go in using my Bee Sting ink pad, and I'm just going to blend this lightly all around the edges of the surface of the cardstock. This is a super easy way to transform the color of your cardstock, and since my inks blend so well and smooth, it really just makes it look like it was actually that color of cardstock anyways, which I really like, and it'll match any of the inks that we used. So since we used Bee Sting on our card project today, it's just really easily matching it to the card. And then I've added adhesive down onto my candle's background, and I'm going to just line this up onto my card, making sure there's an even border, and then I'll lay it into place and adhere everything together. And you can see just how great that blended border matches perfectly with those colored candles that we inked up. I absolutely love it, and it's a great way to not have to have a bunch of colors of cardstock on hand. To finish off this card, I stamped and cut out the Celebrate sentiment and added it onto the center of the cardstock, just like I did earlier with the other sentiments. Now, to finish this off, I wanted to add a sentiment on the inside. And inside of this set, we have a bunch of little sub-sentiments that I thought would be great to add on the inside or below some of these larger sentiments. So with this one, I thought maybe I would do the wishing you another year full of blessings and joy. I think that's a great sentiment to add. And I am gonna do this inside of my MISTI stamping tool because I'm too afraid that we're going to ruin the card if we don't. So I'll add my magnet down, and then I'll line this up in what looks to be the center of my card. And to double check it, I just use these grid lines, and that looks like it's going to be nice and straight. Then I'll quickly ink this up, and we can stamp it right down. And the nice part about the MISTI is just in case we need to, we can restamp it, but it looks like it stamped perfectly the first time. And I just love that. It adds a nice handmade touch and a great message to the inside. And of course you could write your personal message right below it. I love the super bright and blended colors of this card and just how simple it was to stamp that down and line up those coordinating stencils. Coordinating stencils have been a game changer for quick and easy coloring, and I could do this as a great card that you make several of for a nice gift set or for all your birthdays in the year. Alright, moving into the next card, I want to create a fun and interactive card using only one portion of the stamp. So I've cut my piece of stark white cardstock 8.5 by 11 in half this way. Usually I do it the longer way to get a top folding card, but we're doing a side folding card in today's video. And then since it's so thick, I like to score it down. For this, I'm using a scoring tool. I'm going to score it right at 4 1/4 inches to do it in half. And I'm using a new scoreboard. I used to use a different one, but I just ordered this one off Amazon. It's called the Score Buddy. And honestly, this one seems like a lot better quality than the one I used to use. So I'm really enjoying it. And it's a little bit smaller, but this is really the only size you need if you're making cards. And then I'm just going to score it down the center. And of course, I use my Teflon bone folder, but let's see. Let's try this one and see. Oh, this one seems to be decent. Like, it's not horrible. Usually I'm afraid of like shiny marks. This one isn't terrible. It's a little bit shiny. So if you don't want that shine, try using a Teflon bone folder. And this one's just a little bit thicker too, which I like. Either one will work. I like this scoreboard quite a bit. And then when it comes to this background stamp, it's a peel apart background. So what I love about it is that this center row of candles comes out, and we can use this totally separate from the rest of the stamp without having to do any masking, because it would be kind of difficult since it goes up and down to mask off these candles. So I love that you can do one row by itself. So since I'm just stamping one row, I'm going to pick it up using my large Simon Hurley Create acrylic block. I really like this one for large pieces of background stamps like this. And then again, I'll ink this up using a little bit of VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to get a nice jet black image. And then we'll line it up pretty much in the center of this, a little bit up from the bottom, and stamp it down, giving it some good pressure. And this acrylic block really helps with that. And there we go, a really nicely stamped image. And then again, you guys know what's next. We'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder over top of the background to make sure that this ink is set in place and tap off any of the excess. And then I'll heat set this until it's clear and shiny. All right, then again, I'm going in with my stencil, placing down this first layer. And now it's a little bit different when we only have one row of candles. You want to just grab a little bit of tape, and then I'm going to add some tape to the top to mask off those candles. And then I'm going to add some tape over those top candles to make sure we don't get any ink where we don't want it. And I'll follow the same step with these bottom candles, just make sure to tape them in place to make sure we don't get any ink down there on the card. And then for this blending, I'm gonna go in with some greens and blues, starting off with a little bit of Overzealous, which is this super nice bright green color, and I'll blend it in at this side. Next, I'll bring in a little bit of Tropical Tango, and we'll blend the Tropical Tango right into that light green color, again to make a new color in between, and then blend it a little bit further. And then next, we'll bring in a little bit of Clear Skies. I love this color combo because the colors just really lead right into one another. I'll blend that back in with Tropical Tango, and then again, carry it a little bit further across the card. And then to blend that light blue, I'm gonna go in with a little bit of a darker, really rich color called No Diving, and blend it in at the other end and into the Clear Skies. And if we wanna get even darker, we can go in with a little bit of Midnight Snack right at the edge there to get kind of a navy color going. All right, then we'll lift off the stencil. And again, such an easy yet beautiful color blend across the surface there. I love how simple it makes it with these stencils. And then again, we'll bring in that second layer, line it up with the image there, and then we'll grab a little bit of mint tape to again, just tape off the section that we don't want inked. So this time it's that other layer of candles, and I'll just tape it down at the top to hold it onto my card. And for this, I'll do the same thing using that bright shooting star color to blend this top layer. If you want to, you could also do a little bit of Lunar paste up here to make it shiny. But for this one, I'm just gonna opt using ink blending, and I'll go in using a little bit of orange as well to add a little bit of dimension. And once that's done, we'll lift it right off of the surface, and there you can see it's super easily blended out with all of those beautiful colors, and it stayed inside the lines perfectly with those stencils. Now you guys have probably seen me do this next part before, but I'm gonna go in using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and leaving a little bit of a white border at the bottom, I'm just going to cut through this first layer of the card. And all I need to do is just follow along with the design of those candles. So I'll go in and out, leaving a little bit of a white border. And doing this just gives it a little bit of a more playful and interactive edge to the card. So I really like just cutting it out to make it stand out a little bit more. And it's super simple to follow along the edge of those candles. There's not a ton of detail there to cut out. And also I find this bone folder really helpful to kind of smooth over the edges that you cut, because sometimes they turn inward a little bit when you're rounding the corner. So it gives it a nice smooth edge. All right, now I'm gonna do a little bit of stamping, and I just want to hold down my card while I'm doing this stamping. So I'm just going to tape a little bit of extra mint tape to the edge. Now mint tape is really awesome because I know it's not gonna rip the cardstock, because you would hate to rip it right at the end here, but by just closing it like that, it'll help us do our stamping easier. All right, so I'm just placing this in my MISTI stamping tool so we can get perfect stamping. And then for this, I think Celebrate fits the best up there. And then for a sub-sentiment, I want to put one in this opening here. And I think I'm going to use the You Get Better Looking Every Year sentiment. That one's a fun one. And the sentiment works together perfectly because I too would celebrate if I got better looking every year. So I think it goes along perfectly. So I'll line this up in the center again, and then I'll just double check to make sure that it lines up with those grid lines. And I think this looks good. So I'll place those down. And then again, I'm just going to use a little bit of black ink to ink both of these up. And then we'll flip this over and stamp it right down onto our card project, giving it a little bit of pressure. And what I like about this is, again, if it's not perfect, we can always go back in. So this bottom one, it's almost there, but it just needs a little bit more ink. So I'll place that down, press it down, and there we go, perfect. And here's a look at that finished card. I love that really fun edge that we were able to cut out with those candles, and that we were able to add a sentiment right below it so that it's still there both when you have the card closed and open. It's so fun that you can just use the one row of candles separately when you stamp it and when you stencil it for super easy stamping and coloring. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed seeing a more in-depth look at the candles, background stamp, and stencils and all you can do with them. If you enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up and leave me a comment down below on which of the cards were your favorite from today's video. Also down there is a full supplies list to everything that I used in today's video and the candles stamp and stencil, which is now back in stock. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.